other people have their own judgments about what informed is or what it should be. There are these morals or moralistic judgments that people make. So sometimes I find that people say, well, how come you didn't watch this video? Or how did you not know that this event happened 10 minutes ago? As if we should constantly be doom scrolling or reading the news or paying attention.
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the How Are You Really podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Faryal Mallick, and I am very pleased to welcome back Dr. Mariel Herbert to speak about vicarious trauma. Dr. Herbert is a board certified psychiatrist in Northern Virginia and has a private practice there where she offers consultations, psychiatric medication management, as well as individual and group psychotherapy. Welcome back, Dr. Herbert. How are you?
Well enough on this Monday. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. This is such an important topic right now. And I think that everyone is being affected and people don't understand what vicarious trauma actually is. And it's trauma is just kind of defined as something life threatening that happened directly to you or you witnessed it directly. But, that's a very narrow concept. So, how would you define what we're about to talk about?
I agree. And it's really interesting to see different perspectives on what trauma is, or sometimes talking to some of our colleagues what trauma actually is. Some people do define trauma by the traumatic event and how close we are to the traumatic event, which is a very narrow definition. And it really does not get to what we see, as psychiatrists and therapists and people on the mental health side, and we see the downstream effects of trauma. So trauma is more than just an event that happened to somebody, an event that could be labeled traumatic. So you mentioned that that definition is about the event and it's did something potentially life-threatening or harmful. And usually I'm going to say even physically harmful to narrow it even more, happened to me directly, or did I witness it in real time happening to someone else right in front of me? And
Mhm.
that's it. And in order to get a classic post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis, I need to meet that criterion. It's
Mhm.
part of the definition. But vicarious or secondary trauma, what we're here to talk about, isn't that close as far as witnessing an event in person. It's secondary. It means that something like that, something traumatic happened to someone else, but the downstream effects of that trauma, once I hear about it, are happening to me. And that is also what we see in mental health as trauma. We see those effects. We see what happens when our own minds and bodies are overwhelmed and we can't cope with the traumatic events and the impact on us. And that's why we're here. So we're here to talk about those effects.
Yeah. Going to the name, the cost of staying informed. How does that fit into secondary trauma?
Secondary trauma, the trauma that didn't directly happen to us, is still trauma. So if we're both going to agree that it still can count as trauma for the individual person, then what we're really seeing, is world events. And for those of us who are in healthcare and first responders, are the additive effects of the secondary or vicarious trauma. So if we stay informed to the point where our nervous systems and our minds and bodies are overwhelmed, then we're going to have the effects of trauma. And eventually other people will notice, and it could really be devastating to our lives, to our well-being, to our professions. We can get into that, but we all need to find some sort of balance. And I can't tell people what exactly that balance is because it's so personal. But there's the other piece, though, that how we stay informed. And like I said, that's personal, but other people have their own judgments about what informed is or what it should be. There are these morals or moralistic judgments that people make. So sometimes I find that people say, well, how come you didn't watch this video? Or how did you not know that this event happened 10 minutes ago? As if we should constantly be doom scrolling or reading the news or paying attention. But that's not possible. So there's this moralistic judgment that can make people feel guilty or like they're not doing their best as human beings or US citizens or
Mhm.
something that can really make it worse. So it's more than just the traumatic events that happen to us. It can be traumatic events that we witness or learn about over time. Right?
Mhm.
And then after that, it's what other people tell us should be or what we
Mhm.
should do. And I wish, so I guess one reason I wanted to talk about this is I wish that other people could understand that their judgments can make experiences worse for people, can worsen trauma. I've even seen it in other psychiatrists. They've said, oh, well, we should, you should be doing this, you should be seeing this, or how come you feel traumatized by something that happened to someone else miles away? So we're all human and we all make these judgments. I
Mhm.
wish I had a better way of wording it. I don't know how you word that concept, that piece of it, the judgment piece. I'd love to hear from you
Mhm.
about it because it's hard to even educate about that level.
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple of things that I feel very strongly about is one is millennials and older Gen Zs. We've had this pressure on us, and I'm assuming that we just decided to put this pressure on ourselves to have like an opinion about every single cause or every single thing that is going on around the world. So if you don't have an opinion, then you are on the negative side. Like you have to have an opinion on every single thing, whether that's recycling to whatever wars are going on and everything. We have to have a fight in that cause.
Mhm.
And there's so much judgment if you don't. And I try to understand who actually decided to have it, but it's just, what do you call it? A mob mentality that, this generation has created for themselves, right? I mean, and then again, I don't think our brains were made to hold this much information and get this much news. Like it's in the palm of our hands and
Mhm.
it's constantly coming. And even people who try to avoid it will see something, not everything, but something, right? And that can be very painful and very traumatic for various reasons because we know already that there is a genetic component to trauma, right? The intergenerational. Your great grandparents were in war, and somehow that is still being carried in your body. And so when you watch something that is going on in another part of the world on your phone in a video, that can trigger that even if it wasn't something that you experienced yourself. Not only that, but who says that we're not witnessing everything when we're watching these videos now?
Yeah. And it's a tiny little screen, but contains the whole world,
Mhm.
positive and negative. Yeah, you brought an interesting point up. I think so yeah, I'd say people for those generations, maybe people mid or 50s or younger, even, but definitely 40s and younger, were raised by the generation before, sort of after a major world war, but raised by
Mhm.
that generation in a time of prosperity, of
Mhm.
economic growth, where families could be a whole unit. They could Someone could work their whole life at the same job. People could afford a home. The social changes that were happening were generally in a positive, humanistic direction, like caring for
Mhm.
people. But now we're sort of seeing other shifts that are dehumanizing and aren't prioritizing, our humanity, our shared well-being. And so asking a bunch of people who are raised to care about the world and in a time of prosperity and to go to school and get education and you can do anything, the world is your oyster, those kinds of messages, right? Is really tough because we have this level of openness and caring that makes us vulnerable to those downstream effects of trauma and witnessing trauma, whether in person or on our phones or hearing others' stories like we do as psychiatrists. We hear
Mhm.
people's life stories, and that includes their traumatic events as well. So that's I'm not, I'm a bit of an armchair historian here, armchair anthropologist. So I'm not sure if that's it, but there's something about that generational shift and the state of the world that is also impacting us. And this idea that we need to be informed, like I said, in order to be conscientious, in order to be good people. But we sometimes can take that to an extreme, like you were talking
Yeah. I mean, there's so much guilt that I've found in my patients even saying that, yeah, I'm not going out and protesting and I have this guilt that I'm not protesting, or I don't feel strongly one way or the other, or I'm not posting anything. I'm one of those people that doesn't post anything about anything. At some point, I had made the decision that I wasn't going to repost everything that I see, even if I would like for awareness to be raised about this, but I just didn't feel like all this traumatic stuff was necessarily to be reshared for that to happen. And this dates back to, I don't even know, I'm going to say somewhere in mid 2010s or something that I
Mhm.
saw this video. And I have flashbacks from this video of a child being shot in front of the mom in Palestine outside of a mosque or inside a mosque or something like that. And I have flashbacks of that video, you know. So I skip over stories if friends or someone has posted something. I skip over all of that, not because I don't care, but because I know that it will stay with me and give me these be too much for me, for my body, for my mind to handle. And that's why I don't reshare, because I feel like we weren't meant to see, right? If we are in war and we see something, we are there experiencing it in that our bodies and our minds are in that mindset of being at war, right? Um, but we're not, but yet we're seeing this and our minds and bodies are not prepared for this. And it can be actually even more traumatic because our adrenaline and our, like, you know, all our, everything is not
Right.
there to, yeah, to be able to cope with it.
I remember so many people have said some version of the following to me, but human beings were built to survive, not thrive, or
Mhm,
something like that. So we don't we don't tend to have the words for what to do after we just get through something, um, after we survive. And I think that's very important here with everything traumatic going on around us, even if we, in the moment are safe. Like I know right now I'm safe. I'm sitting in my office talking to you. It's warm in here. I'm comfortable. I have water. My basic needs are met. I'm safe. I'm by myself. The door's locked. Everything's calm. But if a few minutes before we started our conversation, I was scrolling through the news, watching videos of people literally dying in violent ways, I might not feel safe in my body. And a few years ago, I'd say before the big push for trauma informed care, in mental health and in medicine and psychiatry, there was a everyone was into mirror neurons. Remember when everyone was so excited about mirror neurons? But this idea that we have these brain circuits and brain cells that actually sort of envision and imagine us doing what someone else is doing across from us. Like if I see someone throw a ball in my mind is also throwing that ball. So there was everyone was excited about mirror neurons. They're not as exciting as all of that, but it brought up the conversation of how our bodies can't always tell the difference. Our brains can't always tell the difference between what's happening to us or happening to someone else. And generally that can be positive. That helps us connect to other people, to
mhm,
care, to empathize, to be compassionate, to try to alleviate suffering, all those things. But if we're not careful, we get completely overwhelmed and then we can't function. So I don't like protests. I don't like large crowds. I never have. I'm sensitive to that, to the noise, to the pushing. It can be very chaotic, and I know other people have their own sensitivities. So I don't like big protests in person. I don't go. Does that mean I'm less of a caring person than someone who goes to every large protest, at least once a month? Not necessarily. But
mhm.
sometimes that's the message you get. I think if we keep having the conversation and trying to educate and care for one another, this will get better. Um, but I did appreciate that you brought it up that way.
I think that, like, I'm the same way, and and one of my patients had brought this up, that, the fear that they had last year around election inauguration and everything, and I told them that we have people who are gonna go out there and protest, and I'm thankful for those people that do that. I'm thankful that they go and they fight for causes and they speak up and represent people who are not able to, like, for one reason or the other. It doesn't mean that we don't have an opinion, or we don't have a fear, or we don't want to fight this. Everyone has their role, and your role might be different than the one that's out there shouting on the side of the road. And that is okay. That is okay. So, being grateful for the protesters, at the same time being graceful to yourself, that, giving yourself grace that I'm playing a different role in this, right? And that is okay.
I think that was beautifully said, and then you half misspoke and then corrected it, but grateful and graceful do go together, and it's only one letter different, and it being able to practice gratitude and give ourselves grace is healing. It actually is part of healing from trauma and vicarious trauma, and it's very much an action. So I know we'll get to that piece, but that
Mhm.
counts too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so what do you think culturally happened? I know you were talking about, we were raised by a generation that was there was prosperity, and there was all these like ideas given to us that we're gonna thrive and we can do anything. And yeah, I mean, our parents and that generation was easily able to get established and everything. But with, of course, like, the technology developing really quickly, I think I was in my teens or something when, like, the internet was just, like, going, growing so fast, right? And, everything just very quickly. I think I was 20 when I got my first phone where I could, like, I don't know, like, all kinds of things where, like, it was so fast. Everything happened really fast, right? There was one thing that happened that got invented, like a little chip, and then we went from that to just everything becoming so easy. I remember when I was younger, my grandparents were in the US and I was in Pakistan. And in order to speak to them, we would have to book a phone call. And it was a certain number of minutes. And I would do that once a week. And it went from that to email to like seeing them every day, virtual, like online, so quickly, right? That, we're so connected. We're so connected. So, which is great. Amazing. How being connected also means now there's more opportunity for more opinions to come around and more judgment to come around. Why do you think when everyone is affected by it, why are we still doing that to each other?
I remember our first computer at home and the dial up noise and sitting and waiting. Then, if you remember AOL Instant Messenger, that sound. Anyway, uh, it it was very rapid. So I think some of the connectivity and technological developments have been a little too rapid, for
Mhm.
as you were saying, for human beings, for our minds and bodies to keep up. But what we've been seeing recently is how our connectivity in this way, like connectivity but through technology, right? Through instantaneous information, through being able to communicate with other people on a large scale at all times, right? Through social media. But those kinds of connections are being used by other people or corporations to make money and to basically to monetize our attention spans, which sounds very cold, but we live in a capitalistic society and all of us work for money and we need money to live. So I would say that's the push. The push is how the connectivity can be used by those in power, by those who have definitely way more money than you or I have. And so we're going to keep seeing ways in which our minds and bodies can be hijacked by traumatic events, by the news, by sharing and resharing, by this level of connection that ends up not being very human anymore or very healthy.
Yeah.
So sorry, that was a very cynical response, wasn't
No, 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 not at all. I mean, unfortunately, we are it's there's very little hope, and I think that's also part of the trauma, right? Like, how do we, in all of this that is going on in the world, find hope and find the energy and motivation to keep going, right? And I think that that is, again, part of being traumatized from everything.
Well, and I think that gets to important piece of our work, as psychiatrists and medical doctors, physicians first and then therapists second, although I don't necessarily rank them in that order. They just sort of
Mhm.
shift around. But hope, hopelessness is a symptom, then that's definitely our minds and bodies telling us that we need to do more than just try to fix our sleep schedules so we can be more engaged during our day to day. Although that's very important. I love talking about sleep. But when there's hopelessness to the point where it could be, major depressive episode, or the hopelessness that comes with burnout where I'm struggling to function even competently at work or making mistakes. If it's the hopelessness that comes with the compassion fatigue, right? Where we can't access the care we have for other people and try to make them feel better, then that's a bigger problem. And I don't expect anything the two of us to talk about to really fix hopelessness to that degree. Hope hope is a full body experience for me. I think it is all of us. It's very personal. So it's hard to put into words and it allows for more connection. So connection to ourselves, our sense of self, like identity, connection to our beliefs and values, like what we hold dear, and connection to an imagined future. So not even, we don't know the future, right? So an imagined future that could be better, healthier, or more meaningful. Um, so hope to me involves being able to feel settled in my body, like not settled like I'm not going anywhere, because that can be traumatic too, but settled in a comfortable enough way so that I can still live my life and working towards something, whatever that is. So it allows for feeling settled and taking action, and the action can involve connection to other people. That's very important for hope, at least for me it is. Connection to other people and even creativity,
Mhm,
because it's that imagination piece. But I can't
mhm,
expect to have connection, real connection to other people and creativity if the world is on fire and I might not be on fire, but I'm sitting here and everyone's making me watch the same video from different angles of the world being on fire.
mhm, 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 mhm. Yeah, absolutely. While there's definitely benefits of, like, the live streaming and awareness and, truth, again, the different angles show different things, but, like, I mean, there is benefit possibly because it's trying to get rid of anything false that is being reported. But again, how many people and who needs to see it? There's, no way to define that and nowhere to control that when we're just broadcasting to the entire world. So I agree with that. You brought up burnout, and I wanted to
Mhm.
talk about that. So how does burnout look different from the results of vicarious trauma
mean,
or the
doesn't
other way around?
it doesn't always. I think they fit together.
Yeah.
A little too well. Some people who study burnout or work with it clinically, I mean, we all do. So all of us work and exposed to burnout have experienced some level of burnout. I love talking about how burnout is sort of what I like to say, it's the rule, not the exception. Because we're taught many things about burnout, and a lot of it is, again, like with the news and vicarious trauma, it puts the guilt and responsibility on us as individuals when it's a systemic issue. Anyway, but that's burnout. But they fit together because when I'm traumatized through exposure to other people's traumatic events,
Mhm,
then I will get to a point where I have symptoms of burnout and I can't function in my own life. So I could
mhm,
be so burnout is potentially trauma in that my mind, body, emotions are overwhelmed to the point where I can no longer do what I need to do in my life. And that could be
mhm,
professionally, because we talk about burnout professionally all the time.
mhm,
But that can also
mhm,
be personally, right? If
mhm,
I go home after a long day of work and I sit there staring at my phone for 2 hours and my family's screaming at me, "Where are you? You're not present right now." Because I'm zoned out or dissociated or just scrolling through my phone, that can be part of burnout and that can be part of trauma. So they sort of overlap in my mind. How about you? How do they fit?
absolutely, there's a relation there. my, like, major thing is that, rest, sleep, just like you brought up, right? Taking a break, none of that fixes that burnout, that especially the one that's related to vicarious trauma, right?
Yeah.
Even the regular burnout that we might have from just work, it's difficult to fix with just like a break or something, right? But this one, I don't know, are there ways to help this burnout? How do we cope? What is your take on that?
So, yes, I'd say it's similar to burnout, um, professional burnout, career burnout,
Mhm,
or life burnout, or even similar to the kind of interventions we do for people who are going through major depressive disorder
mhm,
or
mhm,
adjusting to a certain stress that can be significant in their lives, adjustment
mhm,
disorder. And it's so, yes, rest, like getting a good night's sleep, one good night's sleep isn't going to change everything, but it is necessary to allow
mhm,
for that change. It's a little building block in it. I like when you brought up hope again, so I'll link back to that. We need to be able to get to a point where we can feel soothed, connected, settled from a nervous system standpoint in our own bodies and be able to replicate or redo that over time. So it's not just one blip where we're feeling comfortable and then the rest of the day we're on edge. So we need to be able to practice that sense of feeling settled. And then we need to have that connection and creativity and take and compassion. So if I have some hope and I care about other people in a real empathic way, like I can imagine using my own experience, my own humanity, I can imagine what they've been through and what that means to them, then I'm going to be trying to make people feel better, less overwhelmed, less distressed. I can direct that towards myself, try to make myself feel better, less overwhelmed, less distressed. I mean, that's compassion, right? So if I can make compassion into action, that's what people talk about compassionate action all the time, then I can change some of the circumstances around me, even though I can't change the whole world. So traumatic events are still going to happen, but I can say, today I want to feel calmer in my body and I am going to go take a walk in the park. People might say to me, "Oh, well, why don't you go to some protest instead today?" And I said, "No, today for my own well-being and connection to the world and humanity, what I need to do is take care of myself." And that is not selfish. That's not paying attention to the world. That's me connecting in a way that keeps me alive and functional. But it's hard. I think remember how you're talking about our experiences growing up and everything we take on and intergenerational trauma? I mean, that's a really hard thing to do and practice. Like, we can talk about it, it sounds nice. We know some of the buzzwords when it comes to self care and all of that. But being able to practice it in a way that actually works for us is tough because we sometimes still have those ideas that it's selfish or that it's irresponsible or childish or all these negative judgments that we have ourselves
mhm,
about when we
mhm,
take time.
mhm.
But there's, well, yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there and see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that the selfishness part of it, right, like, is very ingrained into us that if you are taking care of yourself, you're selfish, right? If you put what you need that day in front of other people's needs, you're being selfish, and it's a hard thing to deal with. Like, I struggle with it on a daily basis to actually say, "I need this time for me to do me," because I'm not I can't, especially when you're an empathic person, right? You're trying to be there for everyone and do everything that is in front of you. You were brought up to be a perfectionist, or, you have a type A plus the empathy part of it. You wanna do it all, Um, and it's just super hard to say, "No, I need this time," and I probably come off as selfish to some people, and that's okay at times because I'm not gonna be the greatest empath to everyone, right? Everyone has their own lens, that they use to view me, and that's okay, and I think that that's what I have started telling some of my patients too that you're not going to be the perfect hero in everyone's story. And that is okay. It's okay to not be.
because, I mean, and I can relate, and I would say, certainly our patients and clients can relate, our colleagues can relate. There are a lot of perfectionistic, conscientious people who go into medicine, right? But that leads to burnout. I'd say that leads to even more trauma risk because it's literally not possible. No one is perfect. Even the pretty curated social media feeds we get where someone seems like they have their whole life together and everything's perfect. They're not perfect. Their life isn't perfect. So we're chasing some ideal and we're making these mental comparisons and they're not based in reality at all. So it's hard. I think it's a different point for all of us when we decide we don't have to be perfect or we don't have to compare ourselves to other people and their milestones or their income or their accolades or whatever it is. But when we get there in a way that actually is meaningful and isn't just us saying, okay, I'm not going to do this today, but not being able to connect to that in a real way. When we're able to connect to it, we can make real changes and protect ourselves against burnout and vicarious trauma.
Hi, I'm Noreen Russell, founder of Russell Coaching for Students. At Russell Coaching, our coaches work one-on-one with students to build the skills they need to succeed in school and in life. If you're worried about how your child is doing at school, please reach out and learn more about our programs at russellcoaching.com. Book a free consultation with me and discover what's possible when your child gets personalized support that works. Listeners of this podcast, please use the code CONNECTED for 20% off 3 months of coaching.
I think as we talk about this, I mean, internally, I think the struggle is finding time and taking time to take care of yourself. How that internal struggle of that I'm not being compassionate enough, right? By doing that, how do you balance that out with just that fight you're
Mhm.
having internally?
Sometimes I notice, so sometimes I have to notice. So a lot of times this is all in the background and I miss it. So for example, if I get stuck doing something for other people or staying up late doing work when there's not a real deadline or believing that I need to be doing XYZ for my business because I'm in private practice now, or that I have to do this one task for a patient but it doesn't really need to be done at, after midnight on a Tuesday. And there's another day potentially coming, hopefully. So sometimes I don't notice that I'm not being compassionate to myself or taking care of myself until it's a little too late. But if I notice more regularly or I stick to go back to the sleep piece, if I even set an alarm to remind myself it's time to wind down and it'd be great if I get at least 7 hours of sleep to be functional, then those little reminders and moments of noticing when I'm not taking care of myself will add up. But in many ways, we have to retrain ourselves to take care of ourselves because it's so easy to be lost in all this information, like you were talking about, all this information and expectations, other people's that we've taken in over the years and burdened ourselves with. So it's very behavioral, that piece, but it has more depth and impact if we can stick with it.
You have brought up creativity and its role. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Sure. Um, so in order to be creative, like to do something creative, like artistic or imaginative, like if I get into writing or painting or sculpture or photography, right, I'm just listing random creative hobbies or professions, but in order to do that, I can't be fully in a fight or flight mode. Like I can't feel fully threatened. World events can sort of prompt us to react and respond. This is how creativity can be an act of protest or advocacy or processing traumatic events. But I can't do that if I can't actually create if I'm under threat. Right? So to me, creativity is a step in the right direction, like in a healthy direction for all of us, because it allows our bodies to settle enough, our minds and emotions to be open but not overwhelmed. And then we can make use of our human capacities to imagine and be beautiful and create things and do that. So I don't really think of creativity as the product.
Yeah.
You don't have to be great. I don't have to be the best watercolor painter in the world in
Right,
order to
right.
paint a watercolor painting, which is good because I'm terrible with water.
That's art.
So yes, so that's the creative piece. And I think that's also helpful for people who don't want to gather en masse, like who can't call their senators every day for hours or, shout from the rooftops, hold
Mhm.
up signs on an overpass, things like that to say,
Mhm.
well, you could write a song or you could even make a little dark joke about something um, or yeah, go volunteer at an animal shelter and make little bows for dogs so that they can get adopted because they have cute pictures. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
really. It's the
Mhm.
act of creation that's important.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking of a classmate from medical school that I don't know how we ended up following each other
Mhm.
recently, and we haven't actually had a direct conversation. We're just following each other, and she's practicing medicine, but at the same time she's using her art, and she does these beautiful paintings that she started selling, and she sends that money over to Palestine to feed people, and which is incredible. I think that is the ultimate use of your creativity, right? But I agree that even the little things like getting outside of your mind, stepping outside of your mind, using your hands to create something and your body to move and do something, and I think is so important and such an important piece of self-care or regulation.
Before we close, I always ask, how are you really doing? Thank you so much for spending this time with us on How Are You Really? If something in this episode spoke to you, send it to a friend, leave a review, or follow the show. It really helps. Until next time.